Hello everyone. Today is April 2nd of 2020 and today is Thursday, so all of the bell ringers for the week are due. If you are having any issues getting those, turning them in, you need to let me know because you are still getting a grade for the work that I'm assigning in this class and we need to be mindful of that. So the bell ringer for today isn't so much a quote but a question. Does your past define your future? And that's something that you really need to reflect on and answer because when you look forward into what you perceive to be your future, you need to think about the actions that you've done in your past and whether or not those actions truly define who you are as a person and who you're going to be. With that said, let's go into our lesson for today, which is looking at the first chapter of Things Fall Apart. And yesterday we went over the PowerPoint on Igbo culture and really got a kind of groundworks for the culture that we're reading about. So before we go into chapter 1, just be mindful that this is a culture that is foreign to you. So if you need to reference back or look something up, please feel free to do so. In these lesson videos, I'm going to focus primarily on reading some of the chapter to you and looking at some of the more important parts of the chapters and going over things that might be a little more complicated or may need some further instruction. So, chapter 1 of Things Fall Apart, the first word is the main character's name, Okonkwo. And that is a stylistic choice that the author makes because Okonkwo truly is the most important character in the entire novel. It's not to say that all main characters aren't, but everything that happens in the novel directly revolves around Okonkwo and who he is. So I'm going to go ahead and read part of that first chapter so that we hear some of the names and make sure that we are grounded. Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. His fame rested on solid personal achievements. As a young man of 18, he had brought honor to his village by throwing Amalinzine the cat. Amalinzine was the greatest wrestler who for 7 years was unbeaten from Umafia to Mabino. He was called the cat because his back would never touch the earth. It was this man that Okonkwo threw in a fight, which the old men agreed was one of the fiercest since the founder of their town engaged a spirit of the wild for 7 days and 7 nights. So this first paragraph is very important because it tells us a couple things about Okonkwo. First, he is famous. He's well known throughout the 9 villages that surround his own. And it even says there his fame. Okonkwo is a celebrity in his own culture. The second thing that we get from this paragraph is that Okonkwo earned this fame through personal achievements. He's not riding the coattails of somebody else before him. He is the one who is doing all of this for himself. And so we need to keep in mind that Okonkwo is a very ambitious person. And another thing that we see here is that he's very strong. He's a very physical type of person. He didn't win this fame through being intelligent or sly or anything that doesn't involve something physical. He wrestled a guy that was the strongest guy for 7 years, and once those 7 years was up, Okonkwo came in, won the wrestling match against him, and that's how he won his fame. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more and look here. That was many years ago, 20 years or more, and during this time, Okonkwo's fame had grown like a bushfire in the Harmattan. He was tall and huge, and his bushy eyebrows and wide nose gave him a very severe look. He breathed heavily, and it was said that when he slept, his wives and children in their houses could hear him breathe. When he walked, his heels hardly touched the ground, and he seemed to walk on springs, as if he was going to pounce on somebody. And he did pounce on people quite often. He had a slight stammer, and whenever he was angry and could not get his words out quickly enough, he would use his fists. He had no patience with unsuccessful men. He had no patience with his father. So we know that the novel takes place 20 years after Okonkwo became famous. So this is a man who is around the age of 40 now. And during that time, he hasn't really changed much. We get a little bit about his appearance. He's huge, he's tall, he has bushy eyebrows and a very wide nose, and he looks constantly angry. And so, if you saw this guy in person, he would really be somebody that you wouldn't want to go up and talk to because he doesn't look like a friendly person. And even more to add to that, he really doesn't walk like other people. It says he walks like he's on springs, where he's ready to go and beat somebody up if he feels like it. It also says that he has a slight stammer, which is just a stutter. So whenever he couldn't get the words out fast enough, he would just throw punches. He's not the type of person to get into a debate. And lastly, we learn that he has no patience with unsuccessful men or patience with his father. So, this is also a man who doesn't associate with people who are unsuccessful. And he really doesn't have any patience for the people like his father or his father himself. And so, the next bit is talking about Okonkwo's father himself. His father's name is Unoka. And it says here, Unoka was, of course, a debtor, and he owed every neighbor some money, from a few cowries to quite substantial amounts. So we know that Unoka, who is Okonkwo's father, is a debtor, so he owes a lot of money to a lot of people. And if we see here cowries, that's their money. So he owes people, a range of a few dollars to a lot of money. And the next few paragraphs are dedicated to talking about Unoka. And so Unoka himself is a very lazy type of man. All he wanted to do was drink and play his flute. And so he didn't go out and do the things that he was supposed to do. He didn't go out and farm so his family didn't have food. He didn't go out and earn titles for himself so his family wasn't honored. All he did was borrow money and play his flute. And it really took a toll on Okonkwo. It says here that was years ago when he was young, talking about him playing the flute and drinking. Unoka the grown-up was a failure. He was poor, and his wife and children had barely enough to eat. People laughed at him because he was a loafer, and they swore never to lend him any more money because he never paid back. But Unoka was such a man that he always succeeded in borrowing more and piling up his debts. So, if we look at the description of Unoka, we can infer that Okonkwo's childhood was not very good. And it's really upsetting to see that Okonkwo had such a hard life as a child. And the next bit is talking about an interaction Unoka has with a neighbor, which sums up to Unoka saying, "Yeah, eventually I'll pay you, but I'm not going to now." And Unoka did that for his entire life. The last the last paragraph of chapter 1 says, when Unoka died, he had taken no title at all, and he was heavily in debt. Any wonder why? Any wonder, then, that his son Okonkwo was ashamed of him? Fortunately, among these people, a man was judged according to his worth and not according to the worth of his father. Okonkwo was clearly cut out for great things. He was still young, but he had won fame as the greatest wrestler in the 9 villages. He was a wealthy farmer and had 2 barns full of yams and had just married his third wife. To crown it all, he had taken 2 titles and had shown incredible prowess in 2 intertribal wars. And so, although Okonkwo was still young, he was already one of the greatest men of his time. Age was respected among his people, but achievement was revered. As the elders said, if a child washed his hands, he could eat with kings. Okonkwo had clearly washed his hands, and so he ate with kings and elders. That was how he came to look after the doomed lad who was sacrificed to the village of Umafia by their neighbors to avoid war and bloodshed. The ill-fated lad was called Ike Mefuna. So, when we exit chapter 1, we have to think of a few things. First, Okonkwo is a man who is strong but stern. He is not somebody full of emotion. His single emotion that he shows most of the time is anger. We also know that Okonkwo hates his father, and his father is a lazy man who left nothing for his sons and died ashamed. And lastly, we get a bit of foreshadowing. So if you remember, the term foreshadowing means to kind of hint at something that's going to happen in the future. And the foreshadowing that we see at the end of chapter 1 talks about the ill-fated lad called Ike Mefuna. Plain as day, it says that Ike Mefuna is not going to have a happy ending. The foreshadowing is pretty much there to say that Ike Mefuna is going to meet a horrible fate. And he's not going to have a happy life. In that same breath, he also comes and lives with Okonkwo. So part of this story is going to be talking about Ike Mefuna and Okonkwo's relationship together and seeing how Okonkwo interacts with people in his village and people in his own family. All right, so on the Zoom meeting for today and for each day that we read Things Fall Apart, I'm going to go back over parts of the novel and make sure that people understand what we're reading. Be sure that you come to those Zoom meetings prepared to read along with me as well as participate in those discussions. Also, as another note, be sure that if you cannot access the PDF, that you let me know as soon as possible. All right, I will see you there. Have a good day.